The last major structural component we have to look at as far as our cells is actually the cytoskeleton and how a cell attaches and talks to another cell. So the cytoskeleton we mentioned is for support. Cyto, remember, is cell, so it's the skeletal structure of your cell. And when we look at these guys, we've got three different types that we can work with. Microfilaments, these are actually the smallest ones, micro meaning, of course, small, but we look at these as primarily supporting the cell shape, and they're involved in movement. Okay. Intermediate filaments, kind of medium in size, I guess. So these are anchors for organelles. We look at them as giving great strength and reinforcement to the cell. And then the last one is microtubules. And the big thing with microtubules is we're going to look at them as essentially being monorails, like at an amusement park, for motor proteins. So it's going to set up a network inside the cell that these motor proteins are going to use to move across. It's going to give some support. And the other thing we'll look at is it's very much involved with cell structure movement. So we will see microtubules in something known as spindle fibers when we look at DNA replication. These terms are going to come back a lot, so keep them in mind as we go through. Here are the different ones for you. So the microfilaments, the intermediate filaments, and the microtubules, just so you can have a sense of their difference in size and shape and structure associated with them. The microfilaments themselves, I think, are actually very fascinating. They can help cells move around, or they can actually send out extensions of themselves. So this big long extension from this white blood cell is an extension of microfilaments in this case, stretching out and forming something known as a pseudopodia, or a false foot. And he's after this little green thing. What do you think this little green thing is? It's actually a bacteria. So it's going to try to eat that bacteria. It's cleaning up the surrounding environment. Pretty cool. As I mentioned to you, microtubules set up kind of these monorail sorts of things. Here are motor proteins carrying transport vesicles. You saw them in the inside the cell video that I showed you before, looking at the movement of these motor proteins, and they literally can walk across these microtubule monorails. The spindle fibers I mentioned to you are all of the pink, and the purple in the middle here is actually DNA chromosomes that are being divided. They also can help things move, so they form cilia and flagella and so on that are extremely important for locomotion. Protists, there's that name again of those intermediate organisms that we will talk much more about later on, and we look at these guys as having cilia and flagella associated with them. The difference between cilia and flagella is how they actually function. So we look at cilia often as being sort of a filter kind of movement inside your bronchi that lead to your lungs. They're covered in cilia on the inside, and the idea is they're going to trap particles that might be coming into the air. Flagella, on the other hand, are always associated with large movement. So would have a lot of motor proteins associated with them to help things move around, like the tail on a sperm. So this flagellum or flagella is going to help that sperm move. Very, very different kind of structure than the cilia you see here, that's actually going to help to keep things out of our lungs. Different functions. If we look at the outside of our cell, we have something known as the ECM, or the extracellular matrix. In this case, extra meaning outside the cell, not extra as in more. Extra as in outside the cell. And it's attached to the cell by these proteins that we looked at before. An integrin is a protein that goes across the plasma membrane. So on the outside, you get all of these connecting glycoproteins, collagen we've talked about before, giving structure, support, elasticity to the environment. And then inside the cell, we have those microfilaments that are anchoring in and giving support to the cell. So there's a lot going on to help this cell keep its shape. The problem is we've got to figure out how it can communicate with other cells. So we've got 3 different types of cell junctions in animal cells. Okay, we've got tight junctions. Tight junctions are actually going to help keep epithelial cells in place. Epithelial cells are like your skin cells. So essentially this waterproofs you. So when you sit down on a chair, your cells don't leak fluid everywhere. That would be kind of gross. Anchoring junctions connect cells into sheets. And where you would know this is if you've ever gotten a bad sunburn in the summertime and you start to peel, and when you peel those cells off, they're in sheets, right? They're held together like that because of the anchoring junctions. Gap junctions, you see that these actually have a space here. Okay, I have my gap junction picture over here to show you. These are actually channels or tunnels between 2 cells, and this actually allows molecules and materials to flow between the cells. This is a very interesting kind of design to help speed up the transport of some needed nutrients. In a cross section, this is more what things look like for you, just so you can see. Now, in plant cells have these cell walls. We've mentioned this before, that's going to protect and support the cell. The cell wall is on the outside. We still have on the inside a plasma membrane. So in my picture here, and I'll show you a better one in just a second, we've got a cell wall that's made up of cellulose. We called it fiber when we talked about our macromolecules. But on the inside, we've got plasma membrane. This is really important because the plasma membrane is what's actually going to regulate what moves. I think about the cell wall just as the muscle or the bouncer. It's going to just really support the cell. It's not going to necessarily regulate what moves in and out. So we're going to need the plasma membrane essentially as the ID checker to make sure what's going in and out is appropriate. Then we have this big funny word, plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata are plant cell junctions. These are the ones that are going to allow materials to move between cells, much like the gap junctions do in animals. But these plasmodesmata are tight connections between plant cell walls. And you see here that the plasma membrane, this is cell wall, the plasma membrane actually grows between and covers that joint between 2 plant cells. This makes a plant very, very, very rigid. Holds these cells together. Important for, again, transport of molecules And in a lot of cases, when we look at these plant cells, it's going to be a transport of water is going to be really important, and sugar for us. So we'll look at that more when we talk about plants.